Yo, yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the low key early NFL DFS Week 1 breakdown. I'm Kyle, that is Mike, and welcome, Theo. I'm sure those of
Baby
you,
Ichiro.
baby Ichiro. Different sport, though.
Yeah, we got to think of a comp for football for Theo.
I don't know.
Baby Eric Decker.
What about Robert Aguayo?
Nah, you wish.
God damn it.
That's messed up, man.
I know. But Theo's. Well, actually, not really. I mean, Robert Aguayo's always searching for a new team. Theo's a Seahawks fan, always searching for a new team.
No,
Whoa,
I mean, it was messed up for Robert Guayo. There's no way that Theo would be a second-round pick.
Damn. Theo, you just sitting there getting
Yeah,
roasted. You got to get something.
I feel like I need to leave.
You gotta have some sort of comeback.
This is awesome, man. I think we were talking about Week 1 finally. I mean, I think I've been talking with plenty of people about it over the last few weeks through preseason, but this is something we wanted to bring to you guys a couple weeks back that we finally figured out our schedules to make it happen.
Fuck, man. The schedules. 3 guys, now that I'm working hard enough, man. All 3 of us working a shit ton of hours, so. But somehow made it work on a fucking Wednesday at 10 a.m.
Yeah, right. That's kind of strange. So what do you want to talk about as far as Week 1? I mean, I think just to throw it off first, I think, they released the pricing extra early, so there's definitely going to be some guys that are mispriced. I think that's going to be a key strategy to try and find those guys, really see how chalky they're going to be, and then make the decision to, lock or fade at that point.
I think with the pricing being released so early, there is so much value that's already opened up.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of value.
Yeah, it's key. It really is.
You guys all know, I mean, I've went live a couple times already talking about Deshaun Kaiser. So nothing more needs to be said about him. He is under 5K on DraftKings as a quarterback. So already starting Week 1. So we know that.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. A shitload of value. It's probably legit values at every position at this point.
Yeah.
So at what point do you buy into the value? What point do you fade the value? Do you fade some top tier guys because their ownership's going to be high? Or
I think it depends on your game mode, right? I think you can attest to this as well. If you're in cash, I don't think you want to fade a David Johnson just because of ownership, right? Like, you would fade him if he doesn't have a good matchup and he's going to be chalk. But I don't think you're fading a David Johnson or a Le'Veon Bell strictly because he's going to be high owned. And I think that goes for across the DFS industry. But in tournaments, there's a worthy discussion to be had if you think you can find a value guy that can perform similarly or at least comparably point to dollar and give you an opportunity to pay up at a position or somewhere else that people aren't going to be paying up at.
right.
For me, it's just I don't weight ownership too much because then you get away from what it's all about, and that's scoring the most points. And I want to get the team that scores the most points. And if I think a guy, I bring in ownership to break ties between players I like. If I can only afford David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell, who I think is going to be lower owned is who I'm going to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think especially since the pricing came out so early, we're going to have a lot of guys that are going to get highly touted that maybe shouldn't be. So I think it's also going to be important to try and find sneakier plays as you continue to watch and listen to other people and ourselves talk about different guys, to make that decision for yourself. And I think there's definitely going to be some sneaky plays to uncover as we get closer to Week 1 and we figure out who's going to carry some market share.
Yeah, no, I'm with that 100%. So we have this obviously isn't going to be a slate breakdown right now because we don't have all the slates and kind of where we want to break down. We don't have the final lineups, injuries, etc. But what we have done is highlighted some plays that we are at least looking at. Now, some things have changed in the days since this has been made, but the players all are of worthy discussion. I'll start off with DeShone Kizer, as you see here. I've been on this guy since probably training camp. Mike and Theo are probably tired of hearing me talk about him. I've legit just been sitting watching this guy. He has a rocket of an arm. I think he's in the best possible offense for him. If there's one thing Hugh Jackson can do, it's air out the ball and run a run and gun offense. And he's got weapons around him, right? Mike talked about Kenny Britt. I love Corey Coleman. He's got a pass catching back in Duke Johnson Jr. David Njoku at tight end. There are just players all around for Kizer. And I know there's a couple guys in the group that we've talked to that actually are big on the Browns possibly winning 8 games. And so, with that, they're obviously going to have to make some noise. Their defense isn't great. And with that, with Kizer, they have added 2 offensive linemen that are going to be really an underrated signings this year for them. So there is a ton of upside in Kizer, especially for the price, now that he's been named Week 1 starting quarterback. He gets a Steelers defense that is average at best, especially in the secondary, and they're at home. So I'm all aboard the DeShone Kizer train.
Yeah, my take on Kizer is, I think the outlook is great for them as far as, going forward. Very young team. If I'm a Browns fan, I'm probably the most excited I've been in a while. Just week 1 for me, I think he has a very wide range of outcomes. I really do feel like very low floor, very high ceiling for me with DeShone Kizer's price is worth that risk, however.
Yeah, with you. Theo, you got any takes on Kizer before we move on to Tyrod?
I've been seeing a lot of him in preseason, so I'll keep my mouth shut, but I do like Crowell.
Okay. I'm big on Crowell this year, too. Mike, Tyrod Taylor?
Yeah, so we had intended to make this show a couple weeks back, so it's kind of interesting to see how things change in a few weeks. I know that was definitely a shock of them trading Sammy Watkins, and then before even playing a game with the Bills, Anquan Boldin decides to retire, leaving them with a rookie receiver and Jordan Matthews, really, as far as the passing game. Now, as far as Tyrod Taylor, the reason he's such a good DFS player is because he can run the ball. He doesn't. Yeah, exactly. There's not many games where he threw over 200 yards passing last season. But I liked his price at $6,200. I thought he was a little too cheap. However, I definitely have my reservations now. I know a lot of people are jumping ship on Tyrod Taylor in season long, and I think in week 1, it's going to depend really on what happens. I do think he does have some weapons in Zay Jones and Jordan Matthews and Charles Clay, but I'm not as high as I was on him at 6,200 versus the Jets.
I'm with you. I'll probably steer clear of Taylor only because I'll go with, I'm going to beat this horse to death, DeShone Kizer for cheaper on both sides. But I definitely saw the upside in Taylor, agree, when we were originally doing this. So I can see Taylor, no doubt about it. I think he's still a good season-long play. I think you mentioned Zay Jones. That is a guy that gets a huge bump if you're looking at season-long leagues or even a stream spot in DFS when he's facing a bad secondary.
He's got the right opponent, man. I think this is a good spot for Tyrod Taylor. It's just the unknown, really, in a new offensive scheme without Sammy Watkins is concerning.
Yeah. And then, Theo, you got your boy Derek Carr here.
The most attractive man on this first slide. Let's just start there. Definitely also the quarterback with the best weapons on this slide.
Low-key, do you wear eyeliner like Carr does?
I do. just because of Derek Carr. I think adding Marshawn Lynch, he's going to be. I think Marshawn Lynch will be solid to start the year. A little bit of upgrade over Latavius Murray to start the year, but I think he'll start fading off. But to start the year, since we're talking about week 1, Marshawn is going to come through big to open up more of the field for those receivers and Derek Carr. So okay. I love Derek Carr.
And he gets a good defense.
He's already a beast.
So here's the reason I actually like Carr. And I'm not rushing to play Marshawn week 1. The Titans were the second ranked rushing defense last year. Now, of course, it is a new season, but I actually like the fact that the Titans were so good at rush defense to open up, or at least force the Raiders to pass maybe more than they'd like to with Carr. And he's got the weapons all around him. So I think for that, I actually like Carr more for the lack of production I think we see from Lynch week 1.
And that's one of the things I like to target too is when I see a defense that can make a team one-dimensional, and that one-dimensional part is that offensive strength, I always go to play those guys.
Okay, I'm with you.
I definitely think that that game that is going to be the highest total. And both Mariota and Carr are going to have a lot of ownership. I wouldn't be surprised if they combine for 40% ownership. So definitely going to be a popular go. I don't know which side I would like more, but I know they filled that hole. I know they filled that hole with Marshawn Lynch. You know, they had that three-headed running back. It really was kind of, as far as rushing the ball, very unsuccessful last year. So I'm curious to see how that affects Carr's output as far as season long. But yeah, definitely the game to target as far as DFS, in my opinion.
It's definitely the game I'm going to watch week 1 while I'm hiding in my office at work.
Yeah.
I hope you get fired.
I hope so too.
As far as, so speaking of that, obviously the other quarterback I love week 1 is Marcus Mariota. And I'm going to discuss this all throughout the season. I think it's a pretty evident strategy that I've discussed, and that's home quarterbacks and home underdogs. Mariota is for sure at home. The underdog favorite is up in the air here. Kaiser is going to be an underdog. That's obvious. But Mariota is facing an Oakland defense that is not so good. They have a good pass rush. Obviously, I expect a good year from Mac. He's pretty amazing. But Mariota, we talk about the dual threat option. He possesses that all. I think he's got some solid weapons on this team. Corey Davis. I love the addition of Eric Decker. I think a lot of people actually are down on that, and I'm not sure why. He's still got Delaney Walker there. I'm a huge fan of Decker in the red zone. He is an immediate upgrade from the receivers they had last year. Rashard Matthews, Kendall Wright, not exactly red zone threats. And so you add a receiver like Decker, now all of a sudden he's got a safety blanket there. Mariota is also one of the best red zone quarterbacks in the entire league. If I'm not mistaken, he has the best touchdown to interception ratio since he joined the NFL in the red zone. I believe he only has 1 or 2 interceptions in the red zone. And so obviously adding you have Walker and Decker to pair with that, along with a bad Oakland defense. Mariota is a guy I am targeting for sure.
Yeah, Mariota's probably one of the highly touted quarterbacks coming into the season, I would say, and for good reason. Obviously, that's offense has only gotten better. He's only got another year under his belt, and for DFS purposes, you always want to target Mariota in a game where he has a higher projection for passing the ball than he normally would, because he gives you that inherent floor with his legs.
Yep.
So, this is definitely a good spot for him. It just kind of all lined up for Mariota week 1, I think.
And even
Go ahead. I love Marcus. Marcus Mariota is, to me, right now, my favorite for MVP. He has legs. He has the arm. You're hearing guys in that locker room talk about his leadership, which is one of the things that was hurting his draft stock when he was coming out of college, out of Oregon. Shout out to the Ducks. And I've always been a big fan of his accuracy, and that's one thing he also got hit on when he was coming out of college. For some reason, when he was his accuracy, when he had like the best touchdown to interception ratio in college football history.
Yeah.
I'm with you on I don't know that I have him as an MVP, but I definitely think he is a top 5 fantasy season-long quarterback as well this year. And so with that said, obviously I'll be targeting him a ton in DFS as long as his price remains fair. One strategy I also have in DFS, and I think you guys agree with me here, is I typically never pay up for quarterback. I just don't think It's a position that you need to pay the Tom Brady, the Aaron Rodgers for, unless they're in an elite matchup. Just because you can get a ton more value at quarterback than you can at most other positions.
Yeah, I think it goes into play for season long, especially, but also for DFS. Like the degree of variance between the top quarterback, or from week to week, let's put it that way. The degree of variance from week to week is very little when you compare it to other positions. So I agree. I definitely tend to build my lineups without the quarterback in mind, unless it's something or spot that I really want to exploit pricing. I think it's a case to be made for Mariota week 1. I think he is a little bit underpriced. But as far as even season long, you look at the quarterbacks that finished between like 4 and 12 even. They're all within like 100 total fantasy points. There's something to be said about how fantasy scoring values the quarterback, and I think that's definitely a strategy that I know, like when you go to build your lineups, the first position there is quarterback, but skip over it.
Yeah,
definitely come back to it.
And I think that's honestly a very rookie mistake, I guess, a green mistake. And it's something I did when I first started playing NFL. It's natural inheritance. Baseball, you do the same thing. Basketball, you start with point guard. It's the first position you see, and it's the sexiest position, right? Most people start with an Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady, and you immediately handicap the rest of your lineup. And that's where I think you see a ton of mistakes in DFS.
Yeah, definitely think paying down a quarterback is the way to go.
Theo, you got anything else to add before we move on to Gurley?
Well, this is just DFS all around. When I started, I did that. I would grab a point guard first, grab the highest quarterback first. But now I go for baseball. I fill up my first base, outfield, first. Basketball, I fill up my centers, ball handlers first. Football, if you're on DraftKings, get your wide receivers first. If you're on FanDuel, get at least one of the top running backs first.
Yeah.
So it's always know where the majority of your points are going to come from in the sport that you're playing DFS in, and fill that position before you move on to anything else.
Real quick, I want to touch on that because you brought up a good point. Scoring differences on both sites. DraftKings and FanDuel. DraftKings values PPR substantially more than FanDuel does. FanDuel awards 0.5 points per catch, and DraftKings awards 1 full point. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot on the surface, but you definitely can't draft the same with those roster stipulations. There's also bonuses on DraftKings for a 300-point passing game, a 100-yard rush, or receiving game. So, to me, FanDuel, the best position is running back to pay up for because of the lack of PPR. DraftKings, I think it's receiver because of, or actually, no, I'll still say receiver because I think, especially with the addition of flex, you can add in a pass-catching back and get similar output depending on what it looks like. Like, for example, Duke Johnson Jr., cheap flex running back that offers PPR upside along with some rush upside depending on the game situation.
Yeah. Basically, you're every week you want your running backs on DraftKings to look like David Johnson, who can rush and catch, and then you want like a Bilal Powell and Duke Johnson.
Yeah, I
Theo
think
Riddick.
As far as the most important position to me is wide receiver, I think. So to me, wide receiver is ceiling, running back is floor, really. That's what you're paying for. That's what you want. And maybe your running back 2 on DraftKings, you want to look for a high ceiling depending on the game format you're playing in. Whereas tournaments, you kind of look for that PPR RB2, and cash, you might look for more of a guy that's a 3-down back that's going to rush the ball 25, 30 times in the game. So it definitely is site dependent. It's definitely, game dependent. And I agree. The most important position is your wide receiver. And I think if you're starting your lineup, you want to start with the most important positions and build your lineups from the inside out. Maybe start with a stack you really like and build your lineups around that stack. But just going down the list is not the way to do it.
Yeah. Todd Gurley.
Let's talk about Todd Gurley. Speaking of
terrible Indianapolis defense.
Terrible team at this point. Yeah, so they haven't been able to stop the rush. I think I was on Gurley a lot in the beginning. This was prior to Sammy Watkins, prior to the emergence of Cooper Kupp, kind of living his potential in the Sean McVay offense. So I just kind of like this whole team as a whole with the new head coaching scheme. I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of people are hoping that Jared Goff lives up to his potential as well in this season, but getting back just to Todd Gurley, goes right back to what I was just saying about cash versus GPP. You're talking about your RB2, you look for guys like Todd Gurley. He has no competition. Yeah. This guy is their third down back. He's going to get the ball. If you're talking about a running back on a team, there's not many guys like Todd Gurley in the NFL that you know is going to be the running back no matter what. I think this is a winnable game for them. I think that the coaching staff doesn't have that much confidence in Goff. So if they get a lead, you're going to see them pounding the ball with Gurley. I don't really see them taking chances with Goff if they have the lead in the second half.
Kind of like the Falcons didn't do.
If they didn't have Jared Goff,
Sorry, I got to get that last one in there before we start the new season.
There you go. I don't hate you for that at all.
I'm with you 100% on Gurley. I think he's in it for a bounce back year, season-long wise and DFS. He's priced very, very low on DFS to start the year, obviously based on what his output was last year. I think he's in an incredibly positive matchup with the Indianapolis defense. They've never been a good defense since they've been, even with the Peyton Manning days, the defense never carried him. So don't expect that to change this year. I think Gurley definitely for week 1 bounce back spot.
I think
Todd Gurley.
Yeah, go ahead, Theo.
He's looked awesome this preseason. I think he's definitely bouncing back. Adding Robert Woods, Sammy Watkins, Kupp, all those weapons in the passing game is definitely going to help Gurley. Like you said, he's the only back basically on that team. Their receiving core has gone so deep, Tavon Austin's going to be on the bench all year, basically.
I'd be curious to see what they do with Tavon Austin, but that's a subject for a different matter. New offensive scheme, I think it'd be stupid not to figure him out. But yeah, just another thing with Todd Gurley is if you look at that price range, he's right there next to Darren McFadden, who I think people were talking up at least a couple weeks ago as far as week 1. And I think there's Jay Ajayi, Jordan Howard. There's a lot of guys in that price range where Todd Gurley might fall through the cracks a bit. Maybe not to like the average fan. I think still the average fan knows who Todd Gurley is and might see that. But I still think $6K is a reasonable SP2 price for cash games. I do kind of question his upside with all the offensive weapons that you just mentioned. Yeah. And we really haven't seen much upside from Todd Gurley in his career, even when he was the only offensive weapon. So more of a cash play for me, but at this point.
And then, Theo, you got to get your homer pick in there. So let's hear about Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson. I just think this game with the Packers is going to be a shootout. He historically does pretty good against the Packers. He's had a couple bad games. The biggest one was that I think it was the NFC Championship game a couple years ago where he threw 4 or 5 interceptions, but somehow they still won. And then, but he's usually pretty good for about high 200s in passing yards with two touchdowns against the Packers. I definitely think this is going to be a shootout game. And I don't like their running back situation right now, so even more pressure on Russell Wilson.
All right, over under. Eddie Lacy, more Chinese food restaurants, 8 net or touchdowns this year?
Chinese.
Definitely.
I'm gonna go with the Chinese as well. How many in Seattle do you think he has left to try at this point?
Probably one in one that's hidden in some back alley.
Oh man, he's working on an endorsement deal at this point.
Hey, I respect it, man. He's preparing for life after football.
Yeah, you can't keep that. I do want to say one thing about Russell Wilson. I do like his spot as a tournament play. You look at pricing on DraftKings. Again, I mentioned everyone's really going to be all in on that Derek Carr Mariota game. Matt Ryan gets the Chicago Bears.
Yep.
I think quite easily Russell Wilson's going to fall through the cracks on the road in Green Bay.
Yeah, I don't see Russell Wilson getting a ton of ownership. I won't go there. I'll tell you that much. I'll play Mariota, Carr, and Kaiser all before I play Wilson. But I mean, he does bring that dual threat eligibility. But Theo, I'll ask you this because I know you're a Seattle fan. Without homerism, has their line gotten any better this year? Because their line's been trash the past couple of years. So there you go. I mean, that's a problem.
I think it's actually, but that's also, it'll force him to run also. You know
but
what I mean?
The problem is he's running around in the pocket, scrambling for his life, not.
We've seen that from him. That doesn't scare me that much.
It for 2 years.
I think there's going to be an increased number of offensive possessions in that game. I like that. I like the fact, again, that no one's really going to be on him. Again, I'm talking about Russell Wilson being a good quarterback to target. If you're playing those high entry tournaments, if you're going for the $1 million, if you're going for stuff like that, because I've done some research, and in the past, the people that have won those big tournaments, on average, and the quarterback ownership percentage has been less than 10%, just because it allows you to do other things with your lineups.
Truth. As we move on to the next triplet of players, we have a lot of Browns on here, Mike. Are we thinking that the Browns might be a sneaky stack week 1?
Hey man, I'm colorblind. I don't care what color they are. They could be the oranges.
Oh my god.
So fun fact, Mike probably thought that Duke Johnson and Corey Coleman were wearing the same jersey here. He probably didn't.
Yeah, I'm not that colorblind. I'm actually not colorblind. I was doing a play off their terrible name, the Browns.
No, so. I got you. But I mean, it's worth noting we got both these guys are not expensive at all on either site. Coleman, Duke Johnson. I love Johnson on DraftKings for that flex option with PPR. Obviously, before we started the video, we were just talking about making a lineup. Had him, Coleman, and Kaiser locked in. Super cheap, allows you to get a lot of other players. I love the Coleman to Kaiser upside in week 1, and Duke Johnson fits right in there. I think Mike and I are on the same page with him. Do you have anything to add in terms of what hasn't already been discussed about the Browns?
I think it's just a testament to the hype that we have 3 Browns on here, really. We talk about preseason people being mispriced, and then you get people hyped up, and then that's why these guys stick out. I think Corey Coleman, to me, and him and Kenny Britt are a toss-up to me. I don't see him and Britt both eating week 1, you know? Yeah. I think, to me, it's really just going to be a strict toss-up. Kenny Britt's 4,800, Corey Coleman 4,400 on DraftKings. I think you kind of pick the guy you have the most faith in. But Duke Johnson, to me, just feels like a safety blanket for the first 4 weeks of this rookie season for DeShone Kizer. I mean, a guy that they are actively trying to get into the passing game, a guy that caught more passes than he did rush the ball last season, and was a dual threat in college as well. So new head coach, they're actually lining him up at slot receiver. Isaiah Crowell obviously is the goal line back, the everyday running back. But as far as dropping the ball off in pressure for a rookie quarterback, that's moves around the pocket, and you got a guy that's agile and can get open in Duke Johnson. I see that connection in my mind, man.
I love it. You guys know my thoughts on Hugh Jackson. I fucking love Hugh Jackson as the coach for the Browns with the weapons they have. And I really do think Johnson, I'm with you, Correll's going to be that goal line back. He's going to be the featured back, and Johnson's going to go underlooked, and he's going to be underpriced a lot of the weeks for that reason. He's not going to be someone that you can price at 6,000-7,000.
Yeah, I think extra early here. I talked about as far as RB1, we're gonna have the money to pay up. I might as well stay with the ownership, whoever's gonna go to pay up. But as far as RB2 in cash, I talked about Gurley. I like Jordan Howard in tournaments. I think to me, under 5K, Duke Johnson has a really legitimate upside in this matchup.
And then Theo
on DK more.
Yeah, I agree on DK. Definitely on DK more with the PPR. Theo, Michael Crabtree. We both agree on this play.
Well, Michael Crabtree week 1, Michael Crabtree season long. This is Derek Carr's safety blanket. He loves Michael Crabtree. A lot of people, whenever the Raiders are in a good matchup, they'll go flocking to Amari Cooper. But past 2 years, Crabtree has put up just as much yardage as Cooper with more touchdowns. And he's always, what would you say, like 2,000 less on the sites for DFS?
Oh, yeah. Amari Cooper's routinely in the 8K range, and then you have Crabtree. I mean, Crabtree's had his
he's like
high
mid-6.
points. Yeah, he's had his high points, but Crabtree routinely is the guy that's underpriced and underowned.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Am I crazy for this? I see Crabtree and Cooper as I envision Davis and Decker in Tennessee. Crabtree is that red zone threat, the guy that nobody's going to look to. Now, I'm not comparing talent levels. I'm talking situational roles. Everybody's going to go to Corey Davis. He's the hype rookie. Same with Cooper. I envision Decker and Crabtree having similar roles where they're the red zone guy, and if they're in a good spot, they're going to get looks, and touchdowns are huge. And so even if he catches 4 targets for 2 touchdowns, you're looking at a nice game.
Well, Eric Decker is a touchdown machine.
Yep.
And Crabtree, I would say Crabtree, as far as red zone targets, is like a poor man's Eric Decker. But I feel like Crabtree does more production overall.
I agree with that. I think Crabtree's immensely more talented than Decker. Decker does, by far and away, have the hotter wife. But that's a discussion for another day. I don't even know if Crabtree's
I don't know
married.
that I want to debate. I don't know if I want to debate Crabtree and Decker. It seems easy to me. But I think, again, we talked about at the top, there's so much value that I feel like this mid-range wide receiver area, I mean, you're looking at it on DraftKings between 7 and 5K, there's really not much to love at all anyway. And so, Crabtree, a guy that definitely paid people off last year in a game that we talked about being very popular, falls right into that category. I mean, you look at the options as far as comparing him to other people at his price range. You talked about Eric Decker, who's $1,000 less, but still in that tier of players. But there's cases to be made for these guys, but I agree. It just seems like Crabtree profiles to have the best spot by far of anybody else around him in price.
Yep, I'm with you there.
And the best thing about Crabtree is he floats around that price all year because all the ownership goes to Cooper.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. He's more touchdown dependent than Cooper, correct?
100%.
No.
I think so.
No, it's not.
I think if
they get the same amount of yardage.
It depends on the week.
His target shares are similar.
Crabtree, I believe, gets about the same amount of catches and targets. And
I'm seeing that too.
Crabtree gets more touchdowns.
I'm looking at it here. Last year, as far as the whole season, now I know Cooper. I guess they both played all games, right? Yeah, they actually average only 10 different. Crabtree actually had 10 more targets.
Wow.
So.
That's what I've been trying to tell people all offseason. But everybody goes to Cooper because he's the bigger name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think both are in play in this. Both are in play in this game. It's just been always very tough for me to decide between the two. I feel like I always pick the wrong one.
Speaking of Eric Decker, you definitely didn't pick the most attractive photo of him.
I'm the only one with the.
I don't know.
He's only done slight jogging in full pads.
Yeah, I don't know if he did that on purpose, but whatever. Throw shade at Kyle. This Decker fits with my Mariota pick, as I mentioned. Before Kaiser was the starting quarterback, my go-to stack was going to be Mariota and Decker. Still think that they're an option. A little more expensive, obviously, than Kaiser and Coleman. But Decker, I think, as we mentioned, touchdown machine. Not too much more to add on his upside. I think he provides a relatively safe floor and a good matchup. And I think he's going to be a guy that goes underowned and underlooked because of the Corey Davis hype all year.
For me, I think there's a couple of question marks with me and Decker. For me, this is his third team in 3 years. He has been injured all preseason. They say he's going to be ready for week 1. He is in a legit offense, but I don't know. To me, it's just I'm not excited about Eric Decker anymore, man. I really am not. And as far as week one, again, I talk about trying to find guys that are going to be, I think, out of nowhere sneakier plays, and there's a lot of guys around him that I think fit that mold that I'm looking at. So I don't know. He didn't really make much of a player pool for me, but I could see him being, getting some looks with people playing Mariota and trying to find a stack.
Mm-hmm. It's fair.
I have to wait to see how Mariota uses him. Just because he is a red zone guy in New York doesn't mean Mariota's going to use him in the red zone. Not me.
Mm-hmm. And if he's not 100% for week one, I'm going to avoid it.
Fair. Absolutely. I'm not playing a guy that's partly injured. Charles Clay, Martellus Bennett. Before we get into them, I think this deserves a talking point as well. What is your strategy on tight ends week to week? Because they're routinely less. They're obviously, I mean, your top tier tight ends are usually 5 to 6K. Do you ever pay up for tight end?
It's a different strategy on DraftKings than it is FanDuel. So as far as paying up for tight end, you really have to do it. As far as paying up for tight end on DraftKings, you have to look for a tight end that's going to be heavily involved in the offense, a guy that's going to be targeted 7 to 10 times, because otherwise, your strategy for picking a tight end has to be touchdown dependent. In order to compete, and pick a tight end that's going to be one of the top 5 tight ends on the slate, they either have to catch a bunch of passes or they have to get a tight end. They have to get a touchdown. Mm-hmm. I think I would rather pay down and try to find a touchdown than I would pay up at tight end for a guy that's heavily involved in the offense, like a Greg Olsen or like a Jordan Reed was 2 years ago. That's just my personal strategy. I'd rather save my money for upside players.
Yeah.
I try to look for the value. I'm a FanDuel player, so I look for the value tight ends first, like Jack Doyle last year. Whenever he had good matchups, I run out Jack Doyle, super cheap. If there's no value, then I don't go all the way up to the Gronks, but I try to find some guys in that middle tier.
Yeah,
I never really pay up for tight end.
I never pay for Gronk ever. Just not my strategy. I'm very much a value play at tight end as well. I'm huge on matchups. So for those of you that were with us in NBA, you know how much we value DVP, which is defense versus position. That is back with NFL, and it's something I buy into heavily. Some teams cannot guard tight ends. Some can't guard wide receivers. Some can't guard against the running back. The Niners were my stream spot to go to last year against running backs. I played every running back that possibly faced them. Jacquizz Rodgers, that's never a guy you typically look to play, but yet he carved up the Niners defense. And so I do the same thing with tight ends. The Browns were historically bad last year. The Dolphins are really bad. The Redskins were really bad at covering the tight end last year. Now, of course, that changes year to year. It's very dependent on the backers that they have and your strong safety typically, how they do on covering the tight end. Now, it also factors in the tight end that's playing against them. But I'm all about streaming tight end, all about streaming for the matchup. I rarely ever pay up. I'll pay up at wide receiver.
Definitely. And like I said, there's 2 types of tight ends. There's a tight end that pretty much does route running like a receiver, is targeted like a receiver in the offense, and there's tight ends that do a ton of blocking, that do a ton of decoy work, and their main fantasy contribution is their red zone work. I really truly believe there's 2 types of tight ends. So as far as defense versus position, if I'm looking for a tight end that is a big part of the route running in the offense, is generally what I look to see for defense versus positions. How do the middle linebackers, do they travel with the tight ends? Can they match up with big guys like this? If so, then I put more stock into guys like Greg Olsen, Jordan Reed, Rob Gronkowski. But as far as like paying down, again, I'm looking for a touchdown. I'm looking to see what their red zone target shares are. Do they run plays for the tight end to get a touchdown? That we saw that a ton with Jack Doyle last year in the red zone. They found that their receivers couldn't catch the ball in the red zone. So second half of the season, they started building plays around Jack Doyle. We saw 3 touchdowns a game and 3 catches. So that's kind of where I'm at as far as tight end, and that's where I'm at with Charles Clay. I think there's a guy on here, Zach Ertz, at 3,500 that fits both molds of tight ends I just talked about. Without Jordan Matthews, he becomes a guy that's going to get a ton of targets against a Washington defense that cannot cover the tight end. So it fits that DVP mold, and a guy that has proven he can be a red zone threat. So I think he's worthy of a lot of ownership. I don't even mind fading it. But I think a good ownership pivot is Charles Clay, a guy that also lost their top receiver in Sammy Watkins, a guy that they proved that he is one of those red zone guys all of last season, or I guess more toward the second half of last season, as they were kind of a big play team all year with LaShawn McCoy and Sammy Watkins and Tyrod Taylor. They weren't really, 3 red zone play type of team. But I think with only $300 less than Zach Ertz, Charles Clay has just enough potential of getting a touchdown against the Jets and some market share as they try to develop their offensive weapons in the backfield.
Yeah. Theo, what you got on Martellus?
Martellus Bennett.
Obviously switched teams, by the way. He's on the Packers now.
He's on the Packers.
We just don't have an updated picture because he hasn't played yet.
Couldn't find that one.
So Aaron Rodgers hasn't used his tight ends a ton in the past. So this is just for week 1. Seahawks are terrible at covering tight ends. They get shredded by tight ends going straight up the middle. Martellus Bennett, pretty athletic tight end, I would say. And the one thing in these Packers-Seahawks games is that's the week that Aaron Rodgers does go to his tight end. Because Aaron Rodgers, obviously, great quarterback, smart.
Attractive,
rich.
Cali boy.
So he knows how to pick apart the defense. If tight end's there, he's going to take it. So I love Martellus Bennett, week 1.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is our low-key early week 1 breakdown. Definitely not an entire slate. We will have an entire slate breakdown closer to week 1. Once all of the rosters are finalized and settled. That happens September 3rd. They make their final cuts. We'll have a clear indication of depth charts, things like that. So we'll be back breaking all that down. But in the meantime, we do have the sheets up with preliminary projections. Those will, of course, change as we find out more. If you guys would like to join the River Group and get discussing some DFS, access to the sheets, all of that, we got you guys covered. Of course, as always, hit up any of us in there along with other guys. We're definitely going to have quite a few guys writing some articles. If that's something you guys are interested, if NFL is your thing and you want to write some articles for the Phenoms, to kind of develop your own following among the group, more than welcome to do so. Just hit us up and we can get you guys set up with everything you need. So let us know. More than happy to, of course, answer any of the questions you have and get you guys set up to win some money week 1.
Yeah, I think this is obviously not all the plays we have. I probably have a player pool at each tier and each position that I could probably talk about, but we just wanted to highlight a few plays, and then once we get closer to week 1, do a full game-by-game breakdown, position by position, really dive into the pricing, dive into what we think is going to happen in each game. This is just kind of a little bit of a taste test, So definitely thanks for tuning in. Hope that you found some strategy helpful, and I know I've been building a ton of lineups. If you ever want to chat about how to build a lineup properly or where I'm at with players, hit me up.
Yes, sir. All right, guys, we'll have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you later.